Welcome to the National Institute for Health and Care Research Mentoring Programme and this professional development webinar series. I'm Julie Haddock-Millar and I'm one of the facilitators on the mentoring programme. In this session, we're going to consider maintaining momentum in a mentoring relationship, and it will be less than 10 minutes. So we're going to explore the topic of momentum in mentoring relationships, but more crucially, how to maintain the energy in your mentoring relationships. We'll also look at some reflective questions and I'll signpost some key resources to support you going forward. I'd like to start by considering what makes an effective mentoring relationship. Now, you may have seen this slide in other sessions that you might have attended or watched. And what this shows is the 4 quadrants of the most effective and least effective mentoring relationships. So on the horizontal axis, we have rapport, and on the vertical, we have clarity of purpose. Now, ideally, we would be working in the top right-hand space in the most effective mentoring relationships, where we've taken the time to develop high rapport, we have a real clarity of purpose for the mentoring relationship. We have shared expectations of one another, and there's momentum and an energy in the relationship, which is driven by purpose and rapport. Now, if we're working in any one of the other 3 quadrants, the relationship is often less effective. It might lack momentum and energy. It might lack focus. So it can feel rather like it's task focused, where we haven't developed rapport. Sometimes it might feel like we're going through the motions. Or we have fantastic rapport. There isn't a purpose necessarily for the mentoring conversations or the relationship more broadly, but we've developed a great professional friendship. We really enjoy spending time together, but there's no specific direction for that mentoring conversation or the relationship more broadly. So momentum in the mentoring relationship. Occasionally, mentors and mentees may experience moments of disconnect at some point in the mentoring relationship. The mentor or the mentee might feel that the mentoring relationship has lost momentum or energy, and perhaps a specific mentoring session or conversation might lack direction. So we're not always working in that top right-hand box that we saw in the previous slide. What I'd like to show you here is a model that can address relationship disconnect. It was created by Natalie Lancer and colleagues in a text called Techniques for Coaching and Mentoring, and it's referred to as a moment of disconnect, a process management model. Now, the model enables the mentor and mentee to explore their awareness of the possible disconnect. Consider conditions for a sustained connection that impact learning and potential action that could be taken to reinvigorate the conversation, the mentoring session, or the relationship more broadly. So it's regarded as a framework to help us think through when we notice a moment of disconnect in an individual mentoring session or the relationship more broadly. And there are 7 steps in the model that's presented by Natalie Lancer, and I'm going to go through each individually. And they're presented here on this slide. So the first, awareness. So if we're thinking about an individual mentoring session, we might consider changes in posture or pace, tone or language, atmosphere, overall communication. So is the mentor or the mentee, for example, distracted? Are they not focusing, for example, on the conversation, not fully present? We might notice the location of the disconnect. So is it the mentee or the mentor that's disconnected from the conversation? Have they become disconnected from the relationship? Is there some distance that has been created for whatever reason? So can we notice the location? There's first stage awareness and second noticing the location of the disconnect. The third thinking about the conditions for a sustained connection. So what were the conditions that helped the conversation and the relationship flow previously? How can we develop more of that? How can we reinvigorate, in a sense? So noticing the conditions prior, perhaps, to the disconnect. We might spend some time describing the disconnect. So both the mentor and the mentee explore and identify what's happened to make either one or both feel disconnected. The roles in the situation. Is the mentor and the mentee going through a particularly busy period? A number of deadlines, for example, perhaps feel they haven't got the time to commit to either the relationship or that particular mentoring session. Is there a particular impact from the disconnect? So the conversation might have stalled, no longer committed to the relationship for whatever reason. Things change in any given period. So thinking about mentoring relationships that typically last 12 months, there might have been something that's changed in that time, and either party may not be fully committed. Is there any learning or potential for learning from the situation, from the noticing, the describing, the reflecting, that might enrich the relationship longer term? Can we identify any actions that might be considered? So perhaps changing the location, for example, of the mentoring sessions, the time of day for the mentoring sessions, the framework or the structure of the mentoring sessions. Do you need to weave in, for example, some breaks, moving away from the computer if, for example, you're using Zoom or Teams? So thinking about variety in relation to actions that you might take to reinvigorate either that individual mentoring session or the relationship more broadly. So a very helpful model or framework to help us think through either moments of disconnect or disconnect more broadly in the mentoring relationship. And as I mentioned at the start of the session, thinking about the space we want to be working in to have the most effective mentoring relationship, so that high rapport, high clarity of purpose, shared expectations, that momentum and energy. So a couple of reflective questions to take away. So perhaps looking back on your previous experience of mentoring, what, if any, disconnection did you notice? If you were to experience a disconnect, how might you approach that? And how might you approach the challenge of maintaining momentum in a mentoring relationship? Now, we have a topic guide that accompanies the session and some links within that for further reading. And I've extracted just a few here that you might be interested in reading more. And of course, if you have any questions at all, you can direct them to the programme team at the development support email on this slide. Thanks so much.